Today, I'm going to be ranking every single new card from the Awakening expansion in a tier list. This video was recorded before the expansion released, so all of my opinions today are just going to be based off of how good I think the cards will be. If you're watching this after the expansion has come out, let me know which cards I was right or wrong about down in the comments below. Let's go ahead and let's start off with Kayn. And honestly, I feel like Kayn is just an instant S tier. Literally the only negative thing about Kayn is that he's 5 mana. That's it. Besides that, he has like 15 plus positive aspects. I'm not going to take all the time to name all of them out, but the biggest one is that you're able to draw him literally every game. Like, you're guaranteed to draw him if you're playing a Kayn deck. Unless you built some like extremely weird deck that's just stupid, or like a meme deck, you're going to draw him every game. On top of that, he is a Runeterra champion, and his set of cards that he has access to is probably like the most well-rounded set of cards any Runeterra champion has ever had before. Just to name a few of the different things he's got in his set, he's literally got a Predict card, a Draw card, a Ruination, which is really unfair for a Runeterra champion to have. He's got a Strike card. He also has a card that revives him, which seems probably the most unfair out of all the cards he has access to, because you're already guaranteed to draw him, and now you also have a card that revives him. Like, I don't... It seems like Kayn's never gonna die. Like, it's gonna be impossible to kill him. And then on top of all of that, his scythes are absolutely insane. Basically, his level 1 form has a scythe, and then both of his level 2 forms also have their own scythes. On their own, the scythes are just really cool because when you attack, they grant themselves extra stats. Like, you attack once and it gets +1, you attack a second time, it gets +1 again. It just keeps building every time you attack, right? So if you don't know how equipment cards work already, basically, they stay with you for the entire game. That means if you drop Kayn on board and the enemy just like immediately removes him, because he auto-equips his scythe, just playing a Kayn guarantees you're going to have the Darkened Scythe in hand for the rest of the game. You can play it on another unit, the opponent kills that unit, and you just get it right back in hand. Even just by playing Kayn and having the enemy remove him, you're still at least getting like a little bit of value. But the craziest part about Kayn's scythes, which I'm still not 100% sure about, I'm like 99% sure, not 100, this might not be true, I really hope it's not true, is that it looks like, based on the gameplay we saw in Kayn's reveals, for some reason, the scythes keep their progress when they go back to hand. Kayn recalls himself when he levels up, which means he's going to level up. The Darkened Scythe from level 1 Kayn is going to go to your hand. It is going to keep the +2 attack that it probably already got from you attacking twice to level him up. And then you get to play that +2 Darkened Scythe on any other unit you want. It's just in your hand for the rest of the game. And Kayn gives himself another scythe for some reason. But yeah, Kayn is just absolutely insane. S tier in every single way. I feel like he's going to be the tier 1 deck this meta. But yeah, overall, just huge S tier. Let's move on to his level 2 forms. First up, we got Rost. I'm going to say Rost is also an S tier. He's basically just Kayn, but he's objectively better because he's got Overwhelm, and also his scythe gives +1/+1, not just +1/+0. So he's really good. I feel like he's going to be the main version of Kayn you choose. If you're playing a Kayn deck, you're always just going to choose Rost. Like, that's just the better version. I guess we'll rank Shadow Assassin next. I feel like he's an easy B tier. He's still good, but like, Elusive Challenger has always just been a really bad pair of keywords, because the whole point of Elusive is you don't want anybody to block you, and the whole point of Challenger is you get to make somebody block you. So it's like, they do not do this. They do not fit together. And I think he's still going to be good just for the fact that his scythe grants him +2 every time he attacks. He's going to hit for 5. And a 5 attack elusive is really big. That is huge. And the fact that you can then recycle his scythe if he ever dies is also really huge. I feel like the Shadow Assassin is going to require a completely different type of deck. I want to try building some sort of like elusive deck with the Shadow Assassin, just focused on recycling the scythes, right? And maybe playing it on like Sparklefly or Burblefish or Zap Sprayfin. Some sort of elusive deck, maybe it would be an Ionia as well. Just some sort of deck that's focused around using the scythes and just like forcing the opponent to kill your elusive. But then, since the scythes keep progress, probably, you just keep playing it and like building up how big the scythes are until they run out of removal, and then you just have one really big elusive at the end of the game, and you win. I feel like Shadow Assassin is just B tier. He's not going to ever be as good as Rost. Let's move on to Kayn's champion spell. Kayn's Shadow Step. Now, this one gives Kayn quick attack for 1 round, and then he gets to start a free attack challenging an enemy. So it's basically like a 4-mana Cataclysm. I feel like this is a very just good champion spell for him to have. I'm going to give it a solid A tier. I feel like it's going to work well with Kayn. It's nothing insane, but it's very solid. Moving on to Kayn's 1-drop Forsaken Bakai. This is the most broken 1-drop in the game. This is just the new standard for 1-drops. It predicts, and then it also usually is going to grant itself +1/+1. So it's a 3/2 1-drop that gets to predict. There is literally not a single 1-drop that is more powerful than this in the entire game. It's just objectively better than every other 1-drop there is. So obviously, instant S tier. The fact that Kayn has access to a predict is kind of stupid to me because you're already guaranteed to draw him, right? So like, you don't even need to predict Kayn. Whenever you play this, you're going to be predicting something else. So it's basically just like Kayn's already one step ahead because he's drawing himself. That's his ability. So predict is already going to be drawing the second thing you need, basically. So you're already like 2 steps ahead when you're playing a Kayn deck. But this is also just going to be a really good 1-drop in general. Probably going to see play in a lot of Shurima decks. I feel like this is going to be really good for mono Shurima. I feel like the 1-drop Clockling landmark is literally never going to see play again unless you're playing a landmark deck because this is just the better version. It's just objectively better. So yeah, insane card. Definitely an S tier. Let's move on. Up next, we have the Darken Ballista. Now, this is one of the Darken equipment cards. Basically, the way all these cards work is you can choose to either play them as equipment or you can choose to play them as a Darken unit. Now, already just for being flexible, I feel like the Darken Ballista is at least a B tier, if not higher. But despite everything it has going for it, this card is still really bad, in my opinion. It's only +2, which like for 1 mana is pretty good, but it doesn't count as a spell. So it's not going to give you any synergy with like Fizz or Lee Sin or anything like that. Now, if you wanted to play it as the unit, it might be a little bit better. It is an 8 mana unit, which is really slow, but it has kind of a cool ability, which is basically just that it strikes the strongest enemy at the end of the round. The only downside of this is the strongest enemy also strikes it, right? It's a mutual strike, like single combat. You got to remember you're playing this on turn 8, so like depending on what the opponent's deck is, they might have an 8 attack unit on the board, and if this is striking the strongest enemy, it's going to lose 8 health immediately. And the fact that it has 5 attack is the final nail in the coffin for this card. Overall, I think it's just a B. You know what? I'm going to rank this C. Just for the fact, it's not good, dude. Moving on to Ranger Knight Defector. Now, this is one of Kayn's cultist cards. It is a 4/3 tough, and it is in Demacia, so you could main deck it in just a regular Demacia deck. Once you've equipped an ally this game, grant me Scout. Might be good for Kaisa decks. It's a little expensive, so maybe not. But it's all right. I feel like giving it Scout is not going to do much because it's usually just going to die on its first attack. It's not that good. I feel like this is a C tier as well. Let's move on to another Demacia card that also came with Kayn. Now this one I cannot believe is real. This is Tempting Prospect, and it is the first ever Demacia draw spell. This is the first spell that lets you draw a card in Demacia, which is huge. Obviously good with Kayn. If you're playing this with Demacia, you're like guaranteed going to have a deck that's just full of followers. You're never going to miss with this draw spell. I feel like this is going to be a main deck card, just instant 3 of in every single Demacia deck. Easy S tier for me. Next up, we've got Momentous Choice. This is another one that came with Kayn's package, and it's basically 1 mana Twin Disciplines. Now, you only get +2 if you have equipped an ally this game. Otherwise, it is just +1 on either side, attack or health. I feel like this is a really useful card for Kayn to have. I think it's going to be an instant A for me. I think it's going to see play in a lot of Ionia decks as well, probably with Master Yi and the whole flow thing. Really good for Lee Sin decks and just Eye of the Dragon. Anything with Eye of the Dragon is going to really want to run this card. And I feel like Twin Disciplines is almost just going to become irrelevant at this point. The fact that this is 1 mana, overall just really strong card for sure. Moving on, let's talk about Furious Wielder. I feel like this is really, really strong with Kayn, because he needs to strike twice to level him up. You might have thought about maybe running him with Demacia to get access to single combat or something like that. This might mean that you don't even need to run him with Demacia, because he strikes, the enemy does not get a strike back. So it's better than single combat. You're paying 2 extra mana, and it's included with Kayn. Definitely an A tier, in my opinion, in the context of Kayn. I'm probably going to bump this down to a B tier just overall as a card, because sometimes you will run some other strike cards in Noxus over this one. But pretty simple card, nothing much more to say about that. Let's move on to something a little bit more exciting. Heedless Resurrection. Once you have equipped an ally this game, I cost 2 less. So, already most of the time, instead of 5 mana, this is going to be a 3 mana slow spell. Revive the strongest dead allied champion. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this. Obviously, Kayn. Probably the first thing you predict when you play his 1-drop is going to be this spell. That's what I think I would at least end up predicting most of the time, just to make sure that you always have a way to revive Kayn. And outside of Kayn, there are some really, really funny things you can do with Heedless Resurrection. Probably the most powerful thing you can do with this card is revive Katarina. This card is 3 mana. If you're playing this in a Katarina deck, this is basically 3 mana rally. We have never seen a single rally card in the game that costs 3 mana. So just off of that alone, I feel like this card is S tier. And that's mostly it for Kayn's package. Let's move on to some of the variety cards that got announced right after Kayn came out. The first of which is Draconic Bands. Now this is a Targon equipment card. I believe every single region got its own equipment card. And honestly, I think this might be one of the best equipment cards. It's 4 mana +3/+3, as well as Fury, and it grants its bearer the title of Dragon, which might not seem like it does much, but you have to remember, there is that one spell in Demacia that gives all dragons Overwhelm. So, this card basically enables you to give any unit you want Overwhelm. I feel like there will be some really cool Demacia Targon deck with that specific combo. I'm trying to think about like what champions in those regions you would want to give Overwhelm to that are not already dragons. I feel like this might be pretty good with Jarvan, potentially. You could also just run this on like the 1 mana Faded unit and then give that Overwhelm, and that would probably be pretty good as well. I feel like this is an A tier, for sure. Almost S tier, probably not quite S tier, but it's very good. Let's move on to what I believe is Shurima's equipment card. This one's a little bit weird because it's technically Landmark, but the Landmark gives you an equipment. It is Buried Armory. This is a 1 mana Landmark that countdowns 2, and then it gives you a +4/+4 equipment. Now, this is not fleeting. It does stay with you the entire game, but it does cost 3 mana. So this is basically 4 mana, +4/+4. That's it. Not insane, not crazy. It's all right. The fact that it's a Landmark means it's going to synergize pretty well with a lot of Shurima decks already. Overall, I feel like this is probably just a B tier card for sure. You know what? I actually feel like this is a C tier. And to be honest, okay, I'm gonna move Dark and Ballista down to D tier. It's just that bad. I feel like it doesn't even deserve to be on the same level as this card or Ranger Knight Defector. I feel like those cards are both better than Dark and Ballista. Okay, moving on to a card I am extremely excited and scared about. Great Hammers. This is a 2 mana equipment in Noxus, +2 attack and Overwhelm. 2 mana, grant Overwhelm. And it gives +2. And it stays with you the entire game. This is extremely scary, alright? All you have to do is play this with a deck like Yetis. Already gives you really strong units, really cheap prices, really easy to get them on the board. Just give one of your Yetis +2 Overwhelm. Suddenly it's a 7/5 Overwhelm unit on like turn 4. That's really scary. And if that Yeti dies, you just play this again on another Yeti. And you just keep doing it. That's probably not the best possible example of how to use this card. I feel like it would also be really, really strong with Lee Sin. I don't like this card. I have to give it S tier, but I wish this card did not exist because it is going to be so incredibly strong. Easy S tier. Only time can tell how it will destroy the meta, but it will definitely destroy the meta. Moving on to a slightly more balanced equipment card, let's talk about Jagged Cutlass. This is actually a lot more balanced. +2/+1, Plunder, I cost 2 less. So, a lot of the time, you're going to be playing this for 1 mana. It is in Bilgewater, obviously, it has the Plunder, and it's +2/+1, which is pretty good for 1 mana. I feel like this is a solid card to run, especially because you can play it over and over and over again. Again, that's just the way equipment cards are. Probably good in, like, I don't know, maybe a Gangplank deck. Maybe there's some reason you would want to run this in a Gangplank deck, or a deck that has access to some Overwhelm units, maybe some Elusive units. I feel like this is a solid card for sure. Probably C tier. I'm going to go ahead and put this in C tier. I'll probably put, you know what, I'll put it, I'll do it. I'll put it B tier. It's B tier. All right, next up we have Silence and Suppress. This is a 1 mana slow card in Demacia. Destroy a unit's equipment, and if it is a follower, silence it. This card is going to be really, really handy if we see any sort of like elusive equipment decks prop up, because not only is the elusive going to be silenced, it's no longer elusive, it's also going to permanently destroy the equipment. And that is the very, very important thing about this card. The only issue with this is, of course, the opponent can just recall their own unit, and then that saves it. The opponent can also kill their own unit, and that saves it. So anything like a Glimpse, Vile Feasting their own unit, Mystic Shotting their own unit, that will all counter this. The fact that it's 1 mana at least is good. At least you're not investing a ton of mana into this. I feel like this is solid. Is Demacia going to play it a lot? Probably not. It's not even a cultist card, so it doesn't fit into Kayn's package. I feel like this is a C tier card. The fact that it is 1 mana makes it pretty playable, but I myself cannot think of a single Demacia deck that is going to want to run this. I feel like this is just not, it's not going to see a lot of play. It's okay. I'm glad it exists, but it's not going to be great. All right, up next we have the Hex Obliterator card. Rest in peace, Teemo, by the way. This card is really interesting because what it says is deal 5 to a unit. If I kill it, obliterate it. If this card works the way that it is written, where it kills it and then it obliterates it, like, why would it even obliterate it? I don't understand what that does or what that means or how that would even make any difference other than just normally killing it. I'm going to assume this doesn't kill it. It just obliterates it. It just checks if it would kill it. That's the way it should be phrased, is if I would kill it, then obliterate it. That is the way that Xerath works. That is the way his level 3 ability is phrased. I'm going to assume this is probably just Riot wording. Should be written if I would kill it, not if I kill it. But it is 6 mana, fast speed, obliterate, which is really cool. The thing that you have to understand about this card is there's not a lot of cards in the game that this is going to trade well with. Whenever you remove a unit, whenever you spend 6 mana to kill a unit, like a Vengeance, it feels really bad to spend 6 mana killing a Teemo, for instance, right? You usually want to find a better way to remove Teemo. The same thing goes with this card. You do not want to use this card on a Teemo, ironically, even though that is the card art. You want to use this on something, ideally, that also costs 6 mana. If it has 5 health, odds are it probably did not cost 6 mana. There are a few cards in the game that maybe have some sort of special ability and are like 6 mana, 5 health, but a lot of the time, if you're trying to trade this with a 6 mana unit, it's just probably not going to go through because, like, I don't know, the opponent will play a small little buff on it, and then it just deals 5 and doesn't kill it. I'm going to go ahead and give this probably a C tier as well. Moving on to Loaded Vessel. This is a card that I like a lot. I really like the design of this card. Deal 2 to a unit, draw 1 at the next round start for each damage dealt, and give them fleeting. So the way this works basically is you want to run it with powder kegs, and then the deal 2 to a unit becomes, like, I don't know, maybe deal 5 if you got 3 powder kegs. That means the next turn, you'll draw 5, which is really cool. I feel like this is a D tier though. This is not that good. It's like a cool idea for a card, but I really wish it was priced better. For 5 mana, it's just not that great. All right, next up we have a card I'm really excited about, which is Catalyst version 1.0. This card is basically just Funsmith in a bottle. I feel like this has a plethora of options. You can use this in so many different decks. The fact that it is an equipment means, again, it will be permanent unless the opponent manages to destroy it somehow. I feel like this is probably a B tier card. This would be really cool with, like, I don't know, a Go Hard deck maybe. Maybe just like Annie Jin or Sump Workers would work really well with this as well. I've got all kinds of different random ideas for Catalyst, and I cannot wait to mess around with it. Next up, we have Noxian Defender. Oh wait, no, Noxian Defector. That's actually the exact opposite of Noxian Defender. This is basically an extremely weak copycat of Yordle Smith. Number 1 is 4 cost. Number 2, you can only grow your power to the strongest equipped ally, not any ally. The only redeeming quality about this card is it is part of Kayn's package, right? This is one of his cultist units, and the whole way that you draw Kayn is by playing 3 different cultist units. So this is going to help you draw Kayn faster, and for that reason, it is an okay card. That is the only redeeming quality about this card. It just feels so meh. It feels so mediocre. I feel like this is right around the same tier as Ranger Knight Defector. It's like cool, I guess. It's not that good. It's really not that good. Moving on to Mistfall. Now this looks like a really fun landmark. The fact that this is only 3 mana and it gives you so much value is really good. At the very least, you play this, you draw an equipment. That is already huge. The fact that it draws you an equipment and it doesn't work like Tempting Prospect, right? The Demacian draw spell. It's not like draw an equipment from the top 4 cards or 8 cards or whatever of your deck. It's just draw an equipment, guaranteed. Never fizzles, never doesn't. And then every single time you play an equipment, you get a refill of spell mana and grant the it's just like draw an equipment and then give you a benefit for the rest of the game every time the unit kills your unit with the equipment and you have to play it again. It's so good. Definitely A tier. Not quite S tier. Definitely A tier. I'm not sure exactly what type of deck this is going to fit in. I think it came with Master Yi's package. The funny thing about Master Yi is he really does not synergize with equipment well. So, like, I don't know that this will even run with him. This might be good for Lee Sin, though, like I talked about earlier, Great Hammers from Noxus would be a really good equipment card for Lee Sin. Playing this with Lee Sin, being able to just instantly draw Great Hammers out of your deck, right? Instantly proc Overwhelm. I feel like this is an instant include in any sort of Lee Sin Great Hammers deck. Probably just any Lee Sin deck in general, because running an equipment with Lee Sin is always going to be pretty good, even if it's not Overwhelm. Definitely A tier. Moving on to Shadowblade Fanatic. So this is basically just like Ren Shadowblade, right? He gives you a 1-mana ephemeral every time he strikes. Not a crazy card. The only reason this card is like okay is because he's part of Kayn's package. This is definitely like a C tier again. It's not a great card, but because it helps you draw Kayn, it's all right. All right, next up we got Jun the Prodigy. I don't know why that's such a funny name. Is that a real name? Does anyone in this world have that as their actual name? I've never heard that name in my life. This is not that bad. It's a 4/3 for 3 mana, which is already very solid. That's like the best stat you can really get for any 3-drop. The only problem is that like you're probably not going to run this card in decks that have equipment very often, but that's the only reason you would want to run it, because it's the only reason it activates the barrier and lifesteal. This is probably C tier as well. It's not quite terrible, but it's not quite good either. It's neither. Moving on, we have Vestayan Disciple, a 1-mana elusive. So this is basically like the Flight, but you have to spend a little bit of extra mana each turn to play the spell. Now, I feel like this unit is really, really good, even though you have to spend an extra 2 mana to get it back on board every time it hits the Nexus. As far as flow packages go, this is probably going to be a very, very good card. The fact that it does not put itself in your deck is very strong. The one downside to the Flight was that it puts itself in the top 3 cards of your deck. This card is probably a B tier. It's going to be really good for some decks, not an auto include in every single Ionia deck, but it's pretty good. It's not bad. Next up, we have Disciple of Duran. This card is really cool. I like that we have a way to discount spells. I'm also going to give this a B tier. Moving on, we have Soul Sword. 4 mana, 3/2, flow, I cost 2 less. For 2 mana, +3/+2 is pretty good. This feels a lot like Jagged Cutlass, except obviously just slightly better stats. I don't know how I feel about this card. I feel like this is probably a C tier. Any equipment is inherently going to be pretty good. This was just not the best. All right, next up we have Master Yi's Champion Spell, which is Wuju style. It's basically 3 mana, play both sides of Twin Disciplines, which is just better than Twin Disciplines. Like, Twin Disciplines is never going to be played again, I feel like. I feel like it's just an outdated card. It got power crapped way too hard. I feel like this is probably an A tier. This is really good. Going to be a solid combat trick for a lot of decks. Moving on, we've got Master Yi. Now, Master Yi is a 3 mana 2/3. Round start, reduce the cost of a spell in hand by 1 this round, so it's temporary discount. And flow, grant all allied Master Yis everywhere +2/+0. So already, just reducing the cost of a spell in your hand by 1 is a really powerful deck building tool. There's going to be the regular Master Yi deck, and there's going to be a lot of decks that want to run him just for discounting a spell, like a Go Hard type of deal. There's probably some other spells that you would want to just discount regularly. He's just useful in a lot of ways. He might also be really good with Ezreal. Imagine being able to discount Mystic Shots and Thermo Beams and like Shock Blasts and stuff. That's really good. He is really, really strong. Obviously, his level 2, when he attacks, he just instantly strikes an enemy. Kind of reminiscent of Pike in a way. And I think that's really powerful as well. He does only strike the weakest enemy, so it's not going to be great every single time, but I feel like he's a really solid card. Definitely an A tier in my opinion. All right, next up, let's take a look at Seal in Steel. Obliterate an ally and create a corrupted form with its stats. So basically what this does is you get to choose one of your own units, obliterate it, and turns it into an equipment. I feel like this card would be really powerful if it said kill an ally, because there's a lot of cool combos you could do with like reviving that ally in Shadow Isles, and the fact that it's obliterate just makes it like objectively worse, but it is only 2 mana and it is fast, which means you can use this spell in quite a few different scenarios. Obviously, you're probably going to want to use this as a chump blocker. Someone's attacking, you block, maybe it's a lifesteal unit, obliterate your own blocker, and then all of a sudden, they don't heal because their lifesteal unit doesn't get a strike. The fact that you can use this at fast speed, I feel like is what makes this card very good. I feel like it's going to be a solid combat trick for Targon, and it creates a permanent equipment with any stats you want it to have. Extremely flexible. I feel like this is probably going to be a B tier card. It's a little bit expensive to use this and play the equipment. That would be 5 mana total, but pretty good card overall. All right, next up we have the Darken Lodestone. Now this is how you do a Darken card. This is fantastic. I don't think it's A tier. I'm going to go ahead and rank this B tier, but it is really, really strong, especially in Targon. Support is a huge thing already. I think it's solid. All right, Back Alley Bar. I love this card so much. 6 mana, PNZ landmark, summon a Back Alley Barkeep. Oh, also, by the way, your new cards cost 1 less. Now, if you don't know what that means, your entire hand costs 1 less. As long as you have not played a card yet this game, it will cost 1 less. I mean, unless your hand's just full of cards you've already played, your entire hand's just gonna instantly cost 1 less. Also, you get a 3/2 on board, and you get a random card in hand. For 6 mana, this might seem a little slow, but considering all of that, that's a lot of value. Instant S tier. This can go in so many different decks. I like this card a lot, and I have some cool ideas for what we can do with it. S tier card, in my opinion, way stronger than most people give it credit for. I'm hyped. I am hyped. All right, next up we have Mecha Pulverizer. This is a 3 mana 3/3 equipment from Bandle, and to play it, you have to discard 1. I feel like this is a D tier, down there with Dark and Ballista for sure. Okay, to be fair, playing this with Overwhelm Rumble, that would be solid. For that, I will give this C tier. All right, next up, we have NORRA. Who knew a little old lady could be so scary? Her entire archetype basically just revolves around summoning free units randomly. The fact that she can summon up to 7 cost is ridiculous. You can hit a lot of really, really useful units off of her. But I think she's really strong, and there's some really cool ways you can level her up. The way she levels up is you have to summon 6+ created allies. I have a few ideas on how to do this in some fun ways. One of the first decks I think I'm going to be building this expansion is SI NORRA. The minute I saw her level up condition, I was instantly just thinking Haunted Relic. That's literally 2 mana, halfway to level up on NORRA, which is crazy. I feel like NORRA is an A tier. She's so close to being an S tier. Just the context of the meta that she's coming out in is going to be a little bit too hostile for her to survive. But let's move on to NORRA's support cards. Junk Construct. This one is just Last Breath, plant a mysterious portal. Pretty solid support card for NORRA. I like this one a lot. I think this one is a solid B tier. Even if you're not playing a NORRA deck, like this is still just going to summon you a free 2-drop or 3-drop later on. And for that reason, I think it's really strong. Same thing with the Tea Maker, which is a 3 mana 3/1, except it gets to plant its portal as soon as you play it, or as soon as it is summoned. I feel like Tea Maker is probably C tier, just because it's 3 mana. It's a little bit expensive for what it does. Moving on to Origami Slicer. I'm pretty sure the way this card works is, let's say your opponent draws 3 Puff Caps, 2 Flash Bombs, right? You're playing a Caitlyn Teemo deck. Origami Slicer has +5. You play it on Teemo, you hit Nexus for like, I don't know, 6, maybe 7. Round end, Teemo should still have the buff. I really hope this buff is not temporary. The only reason it says give me is I believe it's a distinction between this and the way Kayn Scythes work. I don't think this keeps progress after the unit dies. I'm going to go ahead and give this a D tier. I was very tempted to give this one an F tier, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume that this is not just like a temporary buff 1 round and then it just immediately disappears. Moving on, let's take a look at Magical Journey. This is a 2 mana burst spell in Bandle City. Pretty fairly priced. The only downside of this card is it does not draw you anything. But for helping to level up NORRA, I feel like this is a solid card. This is not that bad. But this one's probably a C tier. Alright, moving on to Eclectic Collection. This is a 7 mana burst spell from Bandle City. Really funny. I feel like because it's 7 mana, I'm gonna have to make this one a C tier, unfortunately. It hurts me a little bit, but that's just the way it is. I feel like it has to be a C tier. There's no other option here. Alright, next up we have Living Library. This is a 4/3 elusive, and it is a Fae, which is interesting because that means you're going to be able to get this off of Fae Sprout from now on, the little 1 mana spell, right? Now this is already okay for a 4/3 elusive. 5 mana, it's a little bit overpriced. The fact that you have to have activated the trap or boon, it's just going to make this way too hard to hit. This is definitely a C tier as well. It's just 5 mana. Like, it's a little bit too overpriced for what it does. I feel like 4 mana would be very fair. This card would be really good with Bard decks if only Bard had this as part of his package. Unfortunately, he does not. It's an okay card. C tier. Alright, up next we got Realms Caretaker. Basically Zillion if he was a Yordle. This card is tough because, again, it's inherently not going to be that good since it's 6 mana. It's a little bit expensive, but it's got a pretty good ability, especially for NORRA decks. I feel like this is also another C tier. It's just like, it's okay. It's not bad. It's just, it's not quite good enough to be anything other than C tier. Portalpalooza, 5 mana Bandle City spell. Now this one is tough because it is so good. If only it was not 5 mana. 5 mana is a lot, but you have to keep in mind, you're spending that 5 mana probably to summon 4 mana worth of units and draw 1. That's already pretty good. I feel like this is B tier. This is a solid card. And now that we've gone through Kayn, Master Yi, and NORRA, we've got Jax's set of cards. First up, we have his 1-drop, which is Fireth, Reaper of the Sands. I feel like this is S tier, dude. Even though it's ephemeral and can't block, I feel like this card is just so good. And it's purely because of the way equipment works. The fact that you get to pick an equipment turn 1 and have that in your hand for the rest of the game, as well as get free damage in, is so good. Anyways, moving on to the 2-drop, Ionian Hookmaster. This one I feel like is B tier. Again, it's just the same thing as Fireth. Most of the time, this is going to be like a 3-2. 2 mana 3-2 is already good stats. The fact that it gives you a permanent equipment, pretty good. B tier for sure. All right, and next up, we have Catch. This card is really good. I'm thinking just like instant soup tier on this one, probably. Just going to go ahead and place that in soup tier. Basically just like S tier, but better than S because it's got more letters. All right, and next up we have Wandering Shepherd. This is yet another Weapon Master card. This one's special though because you get to pick an ally, and then if that ally doesn't improvise, if you decide you don't want the weapons that ally gets to choose from, Shepherd improvises. So it's 3 mana. You get 2 chances at picking an equipment card, okay? Super strong. I feel like this is probably A tier. It is very close to S tier. I'm going to go ahead and put it in A tier, though. One of the better Weapon Masters, for sure. Next up, we've got Piltover Castaway, a 3-mana Attune improvise unit. So basically just like a 2-mana unit. And he's, you know, he improvises. He's okay. I feel like this is on the same tier as Ionian Hookmaster. He's good if you want another improvised card, I guess, but definitely lower tier than Shepherd and the 1-drop. Also, this tier list is getting really big. Let me zoom out just a little bit. That's better. That's a lot better. Anyways, next card we're looking at is Blades of the Fallen. Now, this card, as funny as it is, might be the most exciting card of this entire expansion for me. Really, really cool that we're getting dual region cards, dual region spells even. I did not expect that. Super exciting. Give an ally last breath, summon an Acathian Mirage with my equipment this round. So basically, if the ally dies this round, it summons a 3-2. The reason I'm excited for this card is, listen, I like building funny decks. I like building random things that most people do not think about. This card fixes a deck building problem that has been in the game for quite a while. Most of you might know the card Gluttony. The way Gluttony works is you play it on a unit with last breath, and it summons a unit with 1 more mana from your deck. Because of this card, Blades of the Fallen, which is in Shadow Isles, you can now play this with Gluttony and just decide, what unit do I want to summon with Gluttony? Oh, Avatar of the Tides? Okay, Shadow Isles Bilgewater. Boom. Done. This is legitimately going to be one of the first decks I try building this expansion. Literally just run like a couple 5-cost units, right? 1 mana, 3 mana, Avatar of the Tides. You spent 4 mana total, summoned him, bada bing, bada boom. It's such a cool idea. But there's also like so many other cool combos that this opens the door for. It is literally, there are no limits. You can do any sort of Gluttony summon you want to. And because of that, I love this card so much. If I want to rate it honestly, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the A tier. I feel like it's a little bit of a meme combo to use it with Gluttony, and it's going to be very hard to set up. So it's not quite S tier, but dude, I love this card. I really do. And I'm super excited to build some weird decks around it. I cannot wait. Moving on to Parts Made Whole. This is another multi-region spell. Just having discard 1, draw 2, really useful spell for Bilgewater and PNZ. The only problem is it is 4 mana, a little bit expensive. Seems comparable to Eye of Nagakaboros. I just think it's going to be very hard to fulfill that discard and equipment requirement. I think most of the time you're not going to be summoning the unit, which makes this card a little bit rough. I'm going to go ahead and put this one in C tier. I think it's mainly going to be a Jax card. Outside of that, probably not going to be that great. Might be okay for Jinx, but again, it's 4 mana. It's slightly too expensive and too hard to summon the unit, so unfortunately, that one's a C tier. Up next, we have Sharesies. Now, Sharesies. What a deceiving name, dude. There's so many crazy things you can do with this. I feel like this is an S tier for sure. The fact that it's in Targon Bandle City does limit your deck building options a little bit. Definitely S tier. All right, next up, we have Entrancing Lure. I believe this is our final multi-region spell. Give an ally challenger this round. If it's equipped, draw 1. And the regions that this one is in are very important. It's in Ionia and Noxus. Very, very good regions for the spell to be in. Ionia has a lot of quick attack. This is going to be great with the Mastery Flow package. Noxus really loves being able to give things Challenger, and it really lacks Draw. This is an insane card. Really strong. I feel like this is also S tier. I feel like it is. This is one of those cards that's going to be harder to visualize without seeing it in action, but I think there's a lot of specific decks that this is going to work really, really well with, and the fact that it gives Challenger and draws one is really strong. To be honest, actually, you know what? I didn't really think about the equipped clause. I think it's going to be A tier. It's not quite S tier. If there was no requirement for it to be played on an equipped ally, then definitely S tier. It's really good. It's really, really good. Probably the best card in A tier. It's going to be A tier, though, in my opinion. All right, moving on to Jax. Jax is a 2-mana 3/2 champion. He basically comes down with quick attack because that is the weapon that he auto-equips, Light of Acathia. And he levels up when equipped allies have struck for 15 plus damage. Jax is a tough one to judge, in my opinion. I'm feeling like he's B tier. He seems like probably the worst champion out of all the champions this expansion. He just seems like slightly above mediocre in my opinion. He's a little bit easy to remove depending on what decks you play him in. He's not quite as insane as Kayn or NORRA, that's for sure. Up next, we'll take a look at Jax's Counter Strike, which is his champion spell. But this spell gives Jax Barrier this round and forges him. I think this is probably like a B tier as well. Given an ally, Barrier is good. Feels on par with like other combat tricks that we've already had. And the fact that you can only play this on Jax, I think it makes it balanced. It's solid. Solid card. Up next, we have Quietus. By the way, I think it's really weird how many 1-mana spells there have been this entire expansion. There have been a lot of just like really powerful 1-mana spells. I think some of the 1-mana spells they released could have been 2-mana. Easily. I don't know. Quietus, basically like a Culling Strike. Kill a unit with 2 or less power, or destroy a unit's equipment. So this is a flexible spell. You have 2 options. This is a very, very good card. For sure A tier. Not quite S tier in my opinion. Next up we have Malefic Spear? Malefic Spear? 3 mana, 2/1. If an ally died this round, it costs 2 less. So we've sort of set the precedent that like a lot of regions just have this mediocre equipment that doesn't really do much, but you can play it really cheap as long as you activate a certain condition. This one does give you Fearsome, which is pretty good for Shadow Isles, sure. Could fit into Spider aggro decks, maybe. Just to give like that one random unit you do run like Doom Beast Fearsome to help you reach lethal, I guess. I don't know about this one. This one feels like a C tier for sure. It's just not great. There's nothing special about it. There's nothing terrible about it. It's just whatever. Next up, we've got the Darken Halberd. This one's a really interesting card. +2/+2 equipment to play me kill an ally. Now this is in Shadow Isles, so this is already really good because Shadow Isles need you to kill allies to get a lot of things done. You can also spend 10 mana to play this as Terosh. Each round, the first time I attack, fill your attackers with revived ephemeral copies of the strongest followers you've slain this game. So he's almost like a 10 mana harrowing on attack, basically. Seems like a good card to run in ramp decks for sure. I feel like he's just like, he is too easy to counter because you just vengeance him and then your harrowing doesn't happen, right? Harrowing is only really countered by deny. That's it. That is all it is really countered by. This one feels like a B tier to me. All right, next up we have Keeper of the Box. 2 mana Fearsome. Once you've equipped an ally this game, grant me Lifesteal. This is really, really good for Kayn. And that's it. That is the only place this is good. Having a 2 mana follower changes Kayn's package so much. Now we have a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and 4-drop. In Shadow Isles, it's not that good. 2 mana, 2/2 Fearsome. You don't really need Lifesteal. Like, you'd rather just run healing in the form of like a Withering Wail or some sort of drain spell. So I feel like this is... I'm gonna put this in C. I feel like this card does not deserve a higher rating just because of Kayn. Really good with Kayn's package, but that's it. Next up, we have Gift of the Hearthblood, a 5 mana burst Freljord spell. It is 5 mana, but it's heal 4, granting every single thing in your deck that you could possibly grant +1/+1 besides champions. Everything this card has for 5 mana. S tier, in my opinion. it's still a little bit expensive. You're not always going to be able to play it. It's not going to fit every single deck. There are going to be decks that abuse this card and just win games with it because it is insane. It is a lot of value. Moving on, Phone Club. +4/+4, 5 mana. I want to put this in F tier so bad. However, it is in Freljord. Freljord has a lot of overwhelmed units. This is a permanent buff that you could recycle for all your overwhelmed. It's okay. It's like a D tier. It's definitely a D tier. It's not the worst. It could be a lot worse, right? Our next card, Demacian Steel. +1/+1 equipment for 1 mana. I would love to know why this card exists. I would just love to know. It would have been so easy for them to just make this +1/+1 tough. And then boom. Like, okay, this is a good card. This is a solid card. Permanent +1/+1 tough. That is a good equipment for Demacian. It would make sense because the whole point of tough is it's like they're wearing armor. That's why they have tough. This is literally armor. This is just F. This is F tier. There is no other way to look at it. It's just F tier. Like, sure, it's permanent, but it's +1/+1. Demacia can never afford to run a +1/+1 card. It's just not enough value. Like I said earlier, like they don't have draw. You just can't afford to run something like this in Demacia. It just doesn't make sense. Anyways, moving on to Ornn's package. We have Favored Artisan. When I'm summoned, create a Time and Dedication in hand. Time and Dedication is 1 mana focus speed, Forge an ally. So basically just 1 mana, +1/+1. Kind of like a gem. Think of it like a gem. If you think about it, this is basically like a 2 mana 2/5, which is very good. Now, if Ornn's level up required you to like forge allies 5 times or something like that, then this card would probably be A tier. I feel like this is B tier. It's definitely B tier. It's solid. It's a good unit. It's just like, I don't know. I don't think it sees play with Ornn very much. Up next, we have Adept Weaponsmith, a 3 mana 3/3, play, forge an ally. Very good. Very solid. Again, just gives +1/+1 to something. I still just see this as a B tier. It's a pretty vanilla card. Moving on to Hearthblood Mender, a 5 mana 5/5, forge an ally, and heal it, and your Nexus 3. I feel like this card is really good with Soraka, for sure. Do you want to play Soraka Freljord? I don't know. I feel like this card is probably another B tier. Again, it's pretty vanilla, it's pretty raw stats, but its ability is a lot of value. It does have a lot of value in its ability, so it's definitely, it's okay. It's okay. Next up, we have Weaponsmith's Apprentice. I don't know about this one. Again, it's just a 1/1. Like, it's just raw stats. Grant +1/+1 to the next when you forge. If Forge was part of Ornn's level up or anyone's level up, then this would be really useful, but it's not. So it's just like, it's not that necessary. I feel like you'd rather run something like Omen Hawk, which is just going to give +1/+1 to the top few cards in your deck. This is very B tier. I think this is C tier, honestly. It's just not that great. Next up, we have Combat Cook. 4 mana 2/2. When I'm summoned, I improvise and forge me. So no matter what, this is going to be like a 5/4, 5/5, 6/5, depending on how lucky you are. Listen, dude, you already know. This is soup tier. Easy soup tier. Insane card. Soup is just going to be the new meta. I really think. I mean, it was the meta last season, but it's going to be the meta again, trust me. All right, and we're on to the final champion, which is Ornn. He seems to me sort of like a budget Tryndamere. He does not survive a vengeance, but he's very strong. He is a very easy way to get a big body on board. I like him a lot. I think his level up is relatively difficult, but still achievable depending on what type of deck you're playing. 10 damage is a lot of damage to strike for. Even Tryndamere cannot do that. Even Trundle will not do that a lot of the time. It's most likely going to be Ornn. You're going to want to level him up by him striking. I feel like he's probably a B tier. I really wish his level up requirement was to forge, not to strike, but he's a cool champion. I was really looking forward to him, and I think they did a pretty good job with designing him, so I think he's very exciting. All right, next up we have Bellows Breath, which is Ornn's champion spell. Now this is main deckable because Ornn is not a Runeterra champion. Forge an ally and deal 1 to all units. Then, do it again. So this is basically like Udyr's champion spell, but it happens twice. It seems really strong in the right type of deck, very strong against aggro, and it's pretty fairly priced. If this was 6 mana, it would be a little bit difficult to get on board with, but at 5 mana, it's not that bad. It's pretty good. I'm going to put this in B tier as well. It's definitely solid. Next up, we have Ornn's Forge, a landmark, 3 mana. When I'm summoned or round start, create a fleeting time and dedication in hand. I love landmarks that have round start abilities. Having a fleeting time and dedication basically means each round you grant something +1/+1. This will work really well with Flow. This works really well with Master Yi, works really well with Lee Sin. Being able to forge Lee Sin when he has Great Hammers on is huge because Great Hammers is going to get that buff permanently. And for 3 mana, I feel like this is very fairly priced. Definitely a great card. I feel like this is A tier. Moving on, we have Rot Colossus, an 8 mana, 8/8 Overwhelm. The first time I'm equipped, create a copy of me in hand. Grant it the equipment's stats. He is 8 mana, which is a little bit expensive, but keep in mind, equipment can be played with spell mana. Most equipment is 3 or less. So when you're playing this guy, you're probably just instantly playing an equipment on him, and then you instantly get a copy with that equipment stats. So he just like keeps snowballing himself. A little bit expensive, but for an 8 mana card, definitely A tier. It's a really good card. Lots of value. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad. All right, and last but not least, we have the final day of expansions reveals. Some of you might not have even seen these cards before. These came out the day after ORNN was revealed. First up, we have Heavy Metal, which is a 2 mana Bilgewater spell. Is slow speed, destroy a unit's equipment and deal 2 to it. For Bilgewater to have this, even just having deal 2 is really strong. I think it's an A tier. I think it's really good, specifically because it's in Bilgewater. Bilgewater does not have like any removal at all. So this is a really useful card for them to have. And I think it'll find its way into quite a few decks, just as maybe like a 2 of, just to counter some equipment cards. All right, next up we have Utter Devastation. I mentioned earlier that Kayn had a Ruination card. You guys might have been a little bit confused because maybe you haven't seen this one yet. This is an 11 mana Shadow Isles card. It is a Cultist card, so again, part of Kayn's package. Kill all units except Allied Darken and Allied Equipped units. So it's like a one-sided Ruination that you want to play in a deck that has a lot of equipment and a lot of Darken. And it's 11 mana, so it's 2 mana more expensive. I feel like this is not going to replace regular Ruination. Regular Ruination is just better. But for Kayn to have this at his disposal and be able to run any second region he wants that's not Shadow Isles is so freaking strong. Other than that, I feel like it's probably a B tier. It's 11 mana, which is really expensive. It's also just like kind of restrictive on deck building. So the only way you would really run it is with Kayn, if you think about it. So like overall, I don't know, man. Probably A tier. I would say A tier for sure. It's too good. Kayn should not have access to it, but he does. All right, and next up we have our final card, the Darken Bloodletters. Another Darken card, obviously. It is an equipment and a unit. You can play it as a 1 mana +1. Last Breath. If my bearer is not a Darken Thrall, summon a Darken Thrall. Darken Thralls are a 1 mana can't block follower. The first time I'm equipped, grant me +2/+2. I hate that. I do not like it. Just seems so bad. Like, why would you ever want a can't block unit? I don't know. This will come back to your hand, so you will get to keep playing it over and over and over and over again. It's okay. It's not the best. It's not the worst. There's also the option of playing it as a unit, which is Zolani, a 6 mana Overwhelm 7/7 to play me. Kill an ally. Last Breath, create the Darken Bloodletters in hand. So either way you play it, you're just going to keep getting this equipment back in hand, which is really good. That is really, really, really good. I'm feeling like this is an A tier as well. Not quite S tier, definitely A tier. The infinite value, 7/7 Overwhelm for 6 mana. That's a lot of value. So I think it's just really good. Solid card. And that's it. That's all of the cards from this expansion. Overall, this expansion has some really, really solid cards. I think a lot of power creep. Equipment in general is just really strong because it never dies, obviously, unless it's destroyed. But I'm really worried about Kayn. I feel like we're not going to be able to build any interesting decks this season just because Kayn is going to be so oppressive. But that is it for this video. I will be uploading a lot of videos on this new expansion. I'm going to try to upload the most videos I've ever uploaded for any season before, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching until the end of this video. If you did, obviously you enjoyed it, so maybe consider, I don't know, subscribing down below or leaving a like. And I'll see you guys once the expansion is out. Hopefully these tier list rankings do not age terribly. And hope you guys have a great rest of your day.